Okay, so how accurate do I believe this news article that reports on a specific finding to be? Um, by me, I'm Alexandria. So basically, the news source that I'm using is the New York Times. The article that I picked is super enzymes that speed up and break down plastics, as researchers say. It's by Isabella Kwai. And so some main points and summaries through the article is that the enzyme is actually made up of multiple enzymes, and she references it as a cocktail. And it's actually made up of a collective amount of resources and a couple primary research articles. But the main article that it goes into that it's really based off of is the one that we'll be talking about. So it talks about microplastics and the time it takes down to break down those plastics, and yet it doesn't really talk about the statistics in which the enzyme itself is. So it's titled as a super enzyme basically, but it doesn't really go into details about it. So we can take a look here, and it talks about super enzyme speeds up breakdown of plastics and that it's a cocktail. But it doesn't, and you can see that it's talking about recycling soda bottles and other waste. And British and American researchers are the ones that are commenting on it. When this is something that should be taken into account, the actual people that found this information was actually a French bio-industrial company, which is neither British or American. So they're the ones commenting on this actual article that came out. Because a lot of these other ones, a lot of the other journals and stuff like that are, yes, should be taken into account of. Like here's one, but also it's not the most recent findings like the primary article that this should technically be coming off of, or the reason why it was made. So that being said, this is actually the primary article. It's about PETD polymerase, and it goes into talking about recycled bottles and plastics. And you can see that she actually got her information at the end, which makes sense because it's the conclusion of all their research studies, but also the actual article doesn't talk about how they came to their conclusion or what they did to get through to it. Doesn't talk about the enzymes and which were used. So it doesn't go into detail about what kind of cocktail it was or how it does it. We know specifically that enzymes speed up processes, but we don't know in this case scenario which enzymes that they're talking about from the article. So as we can see, it's a primary resource. They're the ones that went through it. They sent it in to be published by Nature. And then, so these are just a couple of the main points. Yes, it does take less than 10 hours for 90% of a plastic bottle to be broken down. So my final thoughts are actually, I don't know if I can consider this article to be an accurate representation of the actual primary article. And there's a few reasons for that. It's mainly because it talks about how researchers are commenting on it, not necessarily how the actual article is. It only takes one piece of information from it. Yet it seems like it's the reason why this article was made in the first place, because it's the most recent one to come out. And because of that, I don't necessarily think it's accurate, because if it was like that, then she should have credited that it was actually the French bio-industrial company instead of talking about how it's researchers that are commenting on it, because they're not the ones that are coming up with the situation. They're not, let me phrase that better. They're not the ones that are that have stemmed this article. At the end, we can see that this is the one that is the newest and most influential for this article, since it's a breakthrough. Because of that, I don't think it's accurate because it doesn't necessarily highlight it as a big point in the article. It basically highlights that the enzymes are needed in these research. The research that is being done is needed for what is happening in the world and what is taking place in the world. So it's not necessarily showing it, it's explaining why it needs to happen. So because of that, I don't think it's necessarily accurate. And that's just my opinion, and that's my final thoughts on it. Thank you.